Welcome to Event Horizon, and I'm your host, Mark Anthony Peterson. This is the podcast that takes a walk into the paranormal with a splash of conspiracy. This is the podcast that would be born if David Icke and the X-Files had a baby. Guys, welcome to episode 31, and I can't wait to get into it. But before we do that, let me give you my disclaimer. I am not a religious expert. Matter of fact, some people would call me just the opposite, a downright demon, for being so blasphemous. I am not a physicist, theoretical or otherwise. But I did stay at a Holiday Inn Express, had a very good experience back when they were still serving those delicious cinnamon rolls. So I think I have the right to ask a few questions about the crazy thing that goes on in our universe. And that's what this podcast is all about. Crazy questions with a little bit of logic applied to them to see if we can draw out some unique conclusions. The title of today's episode is Come Hell or Highlander. Come Hell or Highlander. How many of you remember the 1986 cult classic film Highlander? Directed by Russell Mulcahy and based on the story by Gregory Widen. It starred Christopher Lambert, Sean Connery, Clancy Brown, and Roxanne Hart. In the movie, an immortal Scottish swordsman, Connor McCloud, played by Christopher Lambert, had to confront the last of his immortal opponents, Clancy Brown, who was playing the Krugan, a murderous, brutal barbarian from North Russia, for the fabled prize, the souls of all mankind. There could be only one immortal left. And they battled each other for that prize. They didn't know why they were immortal, didn't know how they were created to be immortal. They only knew that there was one way to kill an immortal, and that was to separate his head from his body. I love the Highlander movie. In episode 11, which is entitled Fountain of Youth, All Hail the New Greek Gods, I told you about all the billionaires who are trying to live forever and replace God. Because if they become immortal, they will take on the status of gods. Now, though they're investing hundreds of millions of their own dollars, they're still some years off from finding the Fountain of Youth. Let me remind you of what some of these guys are doing. Young blood transfusions. I know it sounds like something straight out of a horror movie, but believe it or not, there are companies out there conducting trials into the effects of transferring blood from young, healthy people between the ages of 16 and 25 into old folks to see if they can make them feel and act and become young again. Yeah, you might as well just call them vampires. Peter Thiel, the guy from PayPal, and his Breakout Labs fund is behind a lot of these different companies who are trying to figure out ways to live forever. Some of the companies who are behind this young blood transfusion process, Ambrosia and the Young Blood Institute, will charge up to $215,000 for this process. The research up to now shows that in mice, young blood reinvigorates the older test subjects, though they haven't quite got the same effects when they've done it with humans. What's the next thing they're doing? Cryogenics. We saw that in Futurama. Freeze your body, your head, and then thaw it out in the future when you believe that someone has the cure for whatever you had or can help you live forever in 1,000 years from now. And there are a lot of famous folks who are associated with cryogenics, including Walt Disney. And of course, Peter Thiel's behind that too. And a guy named Robert Miller. And the companies that are supporting cryogenics, Alcor Life Extension Foundation, Cryogenics Institute, all of these guys think that that's the way to go if you want to live forever. You might be a meat popsicle, but at least you're going to live forever. digital consciousness. Now, you remember Elon Musk saying that he wants to figure out a way to attach your brain to a device so that you can work as a cyborg, or essentially at some point upload your consciousness into that system, which means that you on some level will live forever without a physical form. But are we really physical when you really think about it? We've gone through that in this podcast. We're not real matter at the end of the day. We exist because we believe we exist. I know that's kind of funny and weird, but these guys want to take what you are on the digital conscious level and put it in a piece of hardware. The billionaire behind this movement is Sam Altman, and the companies are Nectome and our Tarsiman Movement Foundation. To be a part of this, you got to plant down about a $15,000 deposit to get started. Now, unlike the others, your physical body's not going to live forever, but your consciousness will. So if you can live with that, that's the program for you. So as you can see, there are a lot of different ways that these billionaires are looking to live forever. And I thought they were years off from finding a solution. Boy, was I wrong. I came across an article that said that the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, you guys know who that is, DARPA, that these guys have developed a new life form that can regenerate itself. Let me repeat that. New life form that should make you pee your pants and regenerate itself. New life form means that these guys have taken on the status of a god. They're creating new life. Now, I didn't say they created new matter, but they created new life that had not existed in our ecosystem before. And that life can regenerate itself. Cut off one part and it grows back. And guess what? DARPA has plans to use it on humans, which would essentially make super soldiers immortal. I know what you're thinking. This sounds like the Avengers, like Tony Stark coming in there and making a new life form from an Infinity Stone that then goes haywire and tries to take over the world. Yeah, it sounds exactly like that. Except in this case, the life form can regenerate itself. For you Dragon Ball Z fans out there, like Majin Buu, cut off one limb, grows right back. I know it sounds cool, but this perverted form of immortality will not bring the joy that man expects. However, I think it will open a door to a new type of hell. Imagine suffering forever because you cannot die. Imagine being infected with physical life so that your soul cannot pass into the next dimension. The universe was built with a certain logic, and man's attempts to unravel that logic is going to give us a new choice. Hell or Highlander. That's why I had to entitle this episode, Come Hell or Highlander. Now, you know me. We're going to dive into the facts. So I'm going to take you through step by step and tell you what DARPA has built. And then we're going to see what the Bible has to say about it. Because the Bible's already talked about what these guys are doing. And they're telling you about a new hell that they're going to unleash on the physical world. In a January 13th, 2020 article from Science Daily entitled Living Robots Built Using Frog Cells, tiny xenobots assembled from cells promise advances from drug delivery to toxic waste cleanup. I'll put the link to this article in the show notes so that you can go through and examine everything that I'm about to talk about. The article starts out, scientists repurpose living frog cells and assemble them into entirely new life forms. These tiny xenobots can move towards a target and heal themselves after being cut. These novel living machines are neither traditional robot nor a known species of animal. They're a new class of artifact, a living, programmable organism. The article continues. The new creatures were designed on a supercomputer at the University of Vermont, and then assembled and tested by biologists at Tufts University. We can imagine many useful applications of these living robots that other machines can't do, says co-leader Michael Levin, who directs the Center for Regenerative and Development Biology at Tufts. He goes on to say, like searching out nasty compounds or radioactive contamination, gathering microplastic in the oceans, traveling in arteries to scrape out plaque. The results of their study were published in the January 13th, 2020 proceedings of the National Academy of Science. Now, guys, here's where this stuff gets really interesting, because it dovetails with everything that I've told you about who I think God is and how our creation has been put into motion. Listen to how these guys created this new life form and tell me you don't see the similarities. The team, including Dr. Levin, used an evolutionary algorithm to create thousands of candidate designs for the new life forms. Attempting to achieve a task assigned by the scientists, like locomotion in one direction, the computer would over and over again reassemble a few hundred simulated cells in a myriad of forms and body shapes. As the program ran, driven by basic rules about the biophysics of what each frog cell would look like and what they can do, they created several successful prototypes and threw out the bad ones. After 100 independent runs of the algorithm, the most promising designs were selected for testing. Guys, all I got to do is put "let there be light" in front of that, and we just started talking about everything that we've covered in this podcast. That there's a unique algorithm that runs the universe, and that the universe vibrates and spins and creates a pattern of matter that is forced into our reality. It is the reason why I argued that aliens have to be real. Go back and listen to that last episode. It's no different than what's described here in this article. Hundreds of different simulated body types that were successful coming out of the algorithm were then tested. How is our reality any different? Several different simulated body types that inhabit the universe, all set in motion to praise God. I know what you're saying. Slow down right now. Hit the kombucha. Okay, I'll take a swig and... Okay, that's good stuff. All right, let's get back to the article. The team at Tufts then gathered stem cells harvested from the embryos of African frogs. The species is xenopus-laevis, which they got the xenobot from. They separated them into single cells and then left them to incubate. Then, using tiny forceps and an even tinier electrode, the cells were cut and joined under a microscope in close approximation of the design specified by the computer. The reconfigured organisms were shown to be able to move in coherent fashion, explore their watery environment for days and weeks, powered by embryonic energy stores. Now, when you turn them over, they turned off, much like a beetle when flipped over on its back, or a turtle. These new life forms exist in a watery environment because they are taken from African frog embryos. Where is it that we are said to come from? Yeah, the water. Starting in much the same fashion. Embryonic tadpole type organism that walked out of the ocean, developed legs, became a mammal, evolved into the creatures that we are today, gaining consciousness, all the way along that trip. Kind of funny that these new life forms are starting in the same spot that we theoretically started in our journey towards consciousness. Dr. Bongard, a professor at UVM's Department of Computer Science and Complex Systems Center, went on to talk about how these new life forms can heal themselves, saying, your laptop is a powerful technology, but try cutting it in half. It doesn't work so well. In the new experiments, scientists have cut the xenobots and then watched what happened. They sliced the robot almost in half, and it stitches itself back up and keeps on going. He concludes, and this is something you can't do with typical machines. God goes on and says, these xenobots are fully biodegradable. When they're done with their job after 7 days, they're just dead skin cells. Interesting. So these guys are like Mr. Mises. Oh, Mr. Mises, look at me. And when he fulfills your wish, Mr. Mises goes away. Now, isn't all that so special? Guys, they're dangling the shiny objects in front of you when we know where this is headed. Regenerative technology like this is only going to be used to make someone immortal. Regenerate parts of your body, all of your body. Keep you young forever. Okay, but don't let me overheat. Don't let me get going. I may have to take another swig of kombucha. Let's make our way towards the final parts of the article, because there are a couple of points here that I thought were quite illuminating. They go on to say, to make an organism develop and function, there takes a lot of information sharing and cooperation. Quote unquote, organic computation going on and between cells all the time, not just within the neurons. These emergent and geometric properties are shaped by bioelectric, biochemical, biomechanical processes that run on DNA-specific hardware, Levin says. Guys, where have you heard that? I simplified it and said, it's your blood. Your brain is just a piece of hardware, a harness that keeps you from experiencing all of reality. The other biochemical, bioelectric, biomechanical processes, that's the unique sauce. Go back and listen to all those episodes. I know you're like, Mark, well, how do you know all this stuff? I told you, I stayed at a Holiday Inn Express. And I'm reading dozens of articles on this stuff every day. But this is interesting that Dr. Levin comes right out and says, hey, guys, this is where the key is. And we finally unlocked it. Now, what's going to scare me is the episode where I talk about the race-defying Jesus' blood. Because imagine what you could do with that if you could scrape some of those cells the way they've done with this African frog. I'm just saying. And I know what you guys are saying. God, Mark, why are you such a doom and gloom? Wouldn't it be cool to be a Highlander? Right? To hear that music in the background? Here we are. Born to be kings, we're the princes of the universe. Yeah, I love that song too. Man, I used to watch Highlander almost every other day in grad school. That was my jam. But this is some serious stuff. So let's dig in and see if there's any hint as to whether or not the Bible talks to this sort of technology and where it's going to lead mankind. And you can guess the chapter where we're going to end up. Revelations. So in a world where tiny xenobots can make you regenerate so that you always stay young, or at least stay intact and never die? What does Revelations have to say about that? Revelations 9:6. And in those days men shall seek death, and it will not come to them. And they will have a great desire for death, and death will go in flight from them. So when you get this immortality, your desire to die, your soul will want to pass into the next realm, but it can't. It's now locked in a prison, a physical prison, of which it cannot escape. Now, how many of you saw Dogma with Ben Affleck and Matt Damon? You remember how they trapped God on earth? They put him in a physical body and then put that physical body in a coma. Wouldn't let it die so that God could step out of that physical body and save the universe. Interesting that Revelations is speaking to that right here. But I didn't stop there in my research on this topic. I wanted to see if Revelations thought that frog cells and technology would be the cause of man's downfall. I know you're going, Mark, if you found that, I'm going to believe. Revelations 16, verses 13 and 14. And I saw 3 unclean spirits like frogs come out of the mouth of the dragon, and out of the mouth of the beast, and out of the mouth of the false prophet. And for they are the spirits of devils, working miracles, which go forth unto kings of the earth and the whole earth, and gather them to battle for that day against the Almighty God. Guys, can it be any clearer than that? 3 unclean spirits come out like frogs out of the mouth of the dragon and out of the mouth of the beast. Now, the ancient Greek word for dragon is translated as dracontos, which means snake, and usually refers to a giant serpent that possesses supernatural characteristics or is otherwise somehow controlled by supernatural powers, like the snake in the Garden of Eden, or the snake that people believe is part of this hybridization process that we've talked about throughout this podcast, and what I'm going to get into a lot deeper after this podcast as we start to examine some of the secret societies that draw their power from this bloodline lineage question. But that's where that word comes from. But what is the beast? What is the beast? What's coming out of the mouth of the beast? The beast is computing power. Yeah, I keep talking about this ancient technology, the ability to harness the vibrational data that exists within this universe, in the ether, to understand it. The team at UVM had the computing power to come up with the number of simulated body types and characteristics based on the African frog embryo. That's computing power like we've never had. That same computing power is finding stars and galaxies that were previously invisible to us before it went online with many of the Google projects. When we reach true quantum computing, can you imagine the computational power, the analysis that could be done on projects like these to create new life forms that will surpass mankind? Now, I'm going to argue that they're just going to recreate what's always been there, what has been before us, in lifetimes before us, like those silicon-based bodies that I think stood with God in the garden. Yeah, they're going to design all sorts of different humanoid structures when you get to the level of true quantum computing. And that will become the beast, at least as it relates to carbon-based mankind. So in my opinion, Revelations is saying is that the frog, the snake, and the quantum computer are going to stand like three unclean spirits with the false prophets, the scientists, and sell us miracles that are going to undo the reality that God has created. What would happen if there was a breakaway society where all the members of that society were immortal? How many generations would it take for that society to be able to harness the power of a planet? How many generations would it take for that society to harness the power of a galaxy and then the universe? If that sort of breakaway immortal society made up of people with the intelligence of an Einstein were able to exist on that timeline alongside non-enhanced humans, how long before they become the new Watchers? How long before their technology becomes so advanced relative to what we can understand that it's indistinguishable from magic? And if they wanted to enslave us, and they could leverage technology that was indistinguishable from magic, they wouldn't have to put handcuffs on us. They wouldn't have to beat us. They would just simply create a new dimension, a new reality, and enslave us by enslaving our minds, by limiting our access to the Creator, by giving us a reality in which they control the rules, to which they control the science, and we exist to serve them within that framework. Some believe that this play has already been written and it is acted out over and over again on our souls. Revelations 13 says, John saw it rise up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns. And upon those horns were 10 crowns, and upon his heads the name of blasphemy. In my opinion, this represents that breakaway society. Those 7 fallen angels who brought to man the technology to start this play that keeps going on, creating the Russian nested doll of enslavement through dimensional separation between those things that God created. Because in the beginning, man had dominion over all things. And though other animals can communicate without speaking, man appears to lack that ability. I say appears because it's there. We have that connection, even at the atomic level. That's all the string theory stuff that we've been talking about. That's all the stuff that we have mentioned of understanding that past, present, and future exist all around us, and that our DNA and our blood are the key to the linkages that tie us to reality and to each other. But we're being separated from all of that. And all we're doing is accepting those little shiny objects that they keep dangling in front of us and calling that salvation. Guys, you're going to have a choice. Come hell or Highlander. Guys, I appreciate you listening to this episode. And if you enjoy this type of stuff and politics, you may want to check out my other podcast, The Mark Peterson Show, where I bring a little bit of paranormal into politics. You should check out the last couple of episodes. I point to evidence that we're already in the middle of World War III. No, not a shooting war, a quantum computer war, an AI war. The digital tools of destruction that we're using against each other to shut down critical systems. The news is not covering it, but I do, And I'm telling you all the different places that are being attacked in this country by foreign systems. Airports are going offline. Banks are going offline. Water systems are going offline. And they all seem random until you sit and lay them out on the timeline and realize that they're orchestrated attacks. Yeah. Also just put out a fun episode dealing with Gayle King and the Kobe Bryant situation, entitled Gayle King Living La Vida Loca. And I think by the time you get to the end of that, you'll understand my disappointment with her interview with Lisa Leslie. Before we close down this episode, I want to thank Marie Manzilla Miller for being one of my favorite listeners. Thanks for following us on Facebook at Event Horizon. And you can also follow us on Instagram and Twitter at Event Horizon. As always, guys, keep the promise that you're not going to tell my priest about any of these episodes. I like sitting in the front row at Mass. Till next time, guys, peace.
Hey, you, podcast listener. This is your last chance. After this, there is no turning back. Take the blue pill. You wake up in your bed and go back to listening to mundane podcasts that won't challenge your religious beliefs and your so-called truths about reality, the universe, and consciousness. Take the red pill. Subscribe to the Event Horizon podcast, hosted by Mark Anthony Peterson, and he will show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. Event Horizon takes a walk into the paranormal with a splash of conspiracy. It's the podcast that would be born if David Icke and the X-Files had a baby. Subscribe to the Event Horizon podcast by Mark Anthony Peterson on Spreaker, iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio, CastBox, Stitcher, or any of your other favorite podcast platforms. Remember, all we are offering is the truth, nothing more.